Everyone, good morning. Today is January 10th, 2022, and I wanted to take some time today to talk about Disney's Magical Express because today is like the official, super official last day that people will be able to ride on Disney's Magical Express. Now, it is true, Disney's Magical Express did discontinue service January 1st of this year, but there have still been they're trying to make sure that they didn't just leave people hanging. So they wanted to make sure everyone got the rides that they had originally planned to Walt Disney World and that they got the rides back to the airport that had originally been promised. So while that's mostly done, today is the official final day of the last trips of the Magical Express. And so, since this is an occasion, I wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about Disney's Magical Express. I wanted to talk a little bit about what it used to be, what it was after the parks reopened in 2020. And I also wanted to take some time to share kind of my thoughts when it comes to the Magical Express and the way that Disney went about discontinuing this service, why I think they may have done it, at least in my opinion, and a little bit of a reminder to always be careful what you wish for. So, let's start off by talking about Disney's Magical Express. Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there who think about Disney's Magical Express and they're like, man, this has been the way you get to Walt Disney World. So let's actually, let's start a little bit before that. So, when you plan a Walt Disney World vacation, and you are staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, the first thing that most people, because most people fly into Orlando International Airport, the first thing that most people have to figure out how to do is how to get from Orlando International Airport to the Walt Disney World Resort Hotel of their choosing, whatever one that they happen to be staying at. So prior to 2005, there were a number of different ways that you could do this. You can get a taxi, but one of the things that you could do was take a Mears motorcoach. Now, Mears is a company. You probably heard that name a lot, especially if you're paying attention to Disney stuff recently. So Mears is this transportation company, and they have a lot of different options as far as transportation. They have motorcoach transportation. Those are those big buses that have like multiple seats in them and luggage that can go underneath, like a Greyhound bus. They also have like smaller options, so like vans, like very large vans with what are they, 10 passenger vans or whatever. And then they also have smaller options, like a minivan. So if you wanted to have your whole family travel in the same vehicle, they have smaller vans as well. Or they had smaller vans as well. And so what you would do before your vacation is you would contact Mears, you would book whatever type of transportation you were planning on taking. So if you wanted private, you would go with that. If you wanted, kind of like bigger or motor coach, you would choose that. And one of the perks for booking with Mears, which I don't remember the price off the top of my head, I've tried to find it, but things get lost. One of the perks with booking with Mears is they would send you information. They would send you these yellow tags that would go on your luggage, and then you wouldn't even have to pick up your luggage when you got to the airport. Someone from Mears would go ahead, they would take your luggage, they would load it onto their bus for you, and then when you got to the Walt Disney World Resort that you happen to be staying at, they'd unload the luggage, give it to Bell Services, who would then bring it to your room. And this was a great service. It did cost. You did have to pay per person. I think the exception to that, and I say I think because I'm not entirely sure, is if you were doing like an entire private vehicle. I believe that was paying for the vehicle. So, you know what I mean? Instead of paying like $20 a person, you're paying like $200 for the vehicle. And so you would end up having something similar happen on the way back. You would bring your luggage. Well, maybe. You would bring your luggage to Bell Services or down to the front desk. Sometimes, I don't know if my memory is like failing me here, so I don't know, like maybe I'm misremembering. But I remember something about being able to leave your luggage like right in the room and they would bring it down for you. This is like from years and years and years ago, so I'm not sure about that, but you know, share your experiences in the comments. But, and then, you know, it would be in reverse. You would go, they would put your luggage on the thing and then you would get to where you're going, and thanks to curbside check-in for your flights, you could just check your bags right there, go through security, and it would be great. Then in 2005, there was this thing announced. And, well, prior to 2005 with Mears. Mears was like the way to go. Yellow buses were everywhere. So Mears was the thing you would use to get, and of course there were other options. Some people would like rent limos and stuff like that. You know, there's plenty of different options at different price points. But Mears was like the go-to. It was like the unofficial, official Disney airport transportation situation. Then in 2005, Disney announced that they were going to be introducing something special, something magical. And it was Disney's Magical Express. Now, the Magical Express was essentially going to be the exact same service as Mears motorcoach. So when you book your vacation, you would set up your opportunity, you would set up your Magical Express, your trip on Magical Express. They would collect your luggage for you. They'd send you stuff ahead of time. You'd put tags on your luggage. They'd collect your luggage for you. You'd get on the motor coach. Then you'd get to your hotel, and your luggage would ultimately get transferred to Bell Services and then transferred to your room, so that when you got to your room, your luggage was there. And the cool thing about Disney's Magical Express, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with now, is that it was complimentary. So instead of having to pay for the Mears service, Disney worked the numbers. They raised prices, as they do every year, and they worked this into the fee of just staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel. Rather than having to factor in additional costs, all you had to do was stay on property, and boom, you would have complimentary motor coach transportation from Orlando International Airport to your Walt Disney World Resort hotel. And that was pretty cool. Unlike the Mears buses that were just yellow, usually they were just yellow, and they were just a motor coach like any other, you know, Greyhound motor coach style bus. Magical Express, had like a cool decoration on the outside. It was wrapped, and it said, you know, Magical Express on it, and there was like a special Disney logo, and Mickey, Minnie, and all the Disney characters were on the outside, like they were waving. And on the bus itself, they had televisions that were showing like hype videos for Walt Disney World. So you'd get on the Magical Express, and it would honestly be like an attraction that would get you to your Walt Disney World Resort hotel. So you'd start right when you were at the airport. They would play cartoons or something like that, so that would kind of keep you and the kids busy for a little while. Then when you started to go, you'd get like information about, think Disney TV. You know, if you've ever been to Walt Disney World and you kind of watch the hotel's TV, Must Do Disney with Stacy and everything like that. It was something similar to that, where you would kind of get an overview of the options available to you, the 4 theme parks. If there was a new theme park, you would get this, like, I remember, I think it was Animal Kingdom was like the newest thing at the time, and so they were like Not necessarily in 2005, but one of the times that I was on the bus, I remember it being like Animal Kingdom's hype video, like a new, you guys remember that? Like the Animal Kingdom hype video? So anyway, so you'd see that, or, during my most recent trip, there was like stuff for Disney Plus. There was like clips from Hamilton on there. And, Downtown Disney or Disney Springs, whatever time you were visiting. So there was a lot of like hype going on, and then your bus driver would say things to you like as you were entering the theme park, like officially going through the gates, and it was magical. It was like this fun trip. So it was different from Mears, despite being the same as Mears. And not only was it like kind of the same, it was exactly the same. In fact, Disney's Magical Express was operated by Mears. So although I don't have any like inside information about this, and I didn't research this because this isn't really the focus of today's video, we're not talking about like the history, like getting into it, but Disney made a deal with Mears, essentially. They wrote up a contract, and they were like, hey, this is how we're going to do this, because people like your service is popular, so we want it. That doesn't sound very Disney at all, right? Yeah, it's like everything. It's like exactly what Disney does. So anyway, so that's basically what happened there. And that was the new go-to way to get from Disney's Orlando, or Disney's, yeah, they haven't taken that over yet, from Orlando International Airport in Florida to the Walt Disney World Resort hotels. Lots of information. You still with me? I need a tissue moment real quick. It is cold outside, and I just took the dogs out before we sat down to chat, and my nose is not handling it well. My nose never handles this stuff well. It's -6 out, by the way, if you're wondering. So hopefully it's not that wherever you are, because that's very cold. And not even that cold, because it was like -20 the other day. Okay, so we've gotten to the point where Disney's Magical Express is a thing, and it remained a thing from 2005 until 2020 or 2019. No, it was 2020. Sorry, my dates are all messed up. I should have wrote notes. I have some notes, but not on numbers, which of course I should have. So Disney's Magical Express basically remained like that until 2020, which is when everything happened in the world that required Walt Disney World to shut down and or limit service for Disney's Magical Express. But before we get into that and the kind of second like emergency evolution of Disney's Magical Express, let's talk about some of the pros and cons that people would talk about. Because truthfully, when something like this is put out to pasture, people like to talk about all the things they really loved about that thing, so like Disney's Magical Express, but people don't always talk about the negative things that they didn't really dig. So if you were going to use Disney's Magical Express, this is basically how it would work. You would book your Walt Disney World Resort hotel, and then you'd have to go to a second like web page. I don't know if it was like a website, but it was like a second web page. And after you've clicked those links, you would put information in about your reservation at the Walt Disney World Resort hotel of your choosing, but you'd also have to have flight information. So you'd have to book a flight. There was no way to fudge this. You'd have to have a flight, and you'd have to have it booked in order to take Disney's Magical Express. So once you put that information in, you would send it off, and then it would like go into an inbox somewhere, and eventually you would get a response. Now, I never had like a super speedy response from Disney's Magical Express. I'd love to know your experiences, so you can go ahead and put them down in the comments below, but I never had a super speedy response from Disney's Magical Express, and it was one of those things that you'd like you'd send out there, and then you would hope that it would get like scheduled and figured out. So it might take a little bit of time. Now, I've never had it not scheduled. It always worked out fine. Although, to be fair, I've only taken Disney's Magical Express a handful of times. I've used Mears many more times than I have Disney's Magical Express. So that would happen. And eventually what would happen is you would get an email, and I think it was however many days, there was a set number of days before your trip, you would get a package in the mail, an envelope in the mail. And that envelope would include important information. So it would include like a confirmation letter that you would want to hold on to and bring with you. It would also include luggage tags. Now, it could include some fun luggage tags that they were giving out for a while. This wasn't always the case, but there was a point where they did include these like luggage tags that you could put on your luggage, which were really cute. I never got any, but I think they were pretty cool. And they would also include these like sticker luggage tags similar to the yellow ones that I explained about earlier with Mears, that you would go ahead and put on your luggage. And that would tell people from Disney's Magical Express that that piece of luggage was someone who was going to be on the Magical Express. So they would go and they would collect all the luggage for you based on those tags. So you'd get that information. You'd want to go ahead and set your luggage up so that it had the tags that it needed. And then after doing that, you would just get to the airport and go on your merry way. So once you've arrived at Disney's, I keep saying Disney's, once you've arrived at Orlando International Airport, not yet Disney's airport, is that like something that happened in another dimension or something, that Disney owns Orlando International Airport, becomes Disney's Orlando International Airport? Once you arrived at MCO, you would just take your family and head down to Disney's Magical Express. Now, you would have gotten a map as to how exactly you would get to Disney's Magical Express from the terminal, but the information was pretty easy because there were signs all over the place. So once you got there, you would basically check in and they would tell you where you needed to go. They would kind of filter you into like corrals almost, or, you know, depends. Currently it is, or formerly it was like these corrals that would take to different resorts. They would go to different areas of the Walt Disney World Resort. And from there, you'd load a bus. Once you get on that bus, you would arrive at your Walt Disney World Resort hotel, and that was it. Next thing you had to do was just go to your room when it was time. And a couple hours later, you could expect your luggage to show up. Pretty simple, straightforward, pretty easy. Then, when you were leaving, sorry, I have so much I want to say, but like my train of thought is like here and here. Then when it was time to leave, the day before your trip, you would get a letter slipped under the door of your Walt Disney World Resort hotel. And that letter would have information about when you needed to bring your bags down to the lobby so that you could get them all checked in and so that you could get on the Magical Express. Now, I just said something earlier about how you would check your bags in ahead of time, and I totally forgot about this. What you would do, especially if you were staying at a deluxe resort, I believe, but again, share your thoughts, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below, or maybe I'll even correct myself if I'm wrong. You could actually check your bags right at your resort hotel. I know that this was the case when you were staying at Walt Disney World Deluxe and DVC Villas. So all you'd have to do is bring your bags down at any time that morning or that day, whenever you were getting ready to check out, that day of checkout. And you could check your bags in right there, which was so cool because then you didn't have to deal with bags for the rest of the day. So if you wanted to go kind of explore, you could do that, and then you just had to get on the Magical Express at your designated time, and then head back to the airport, go through security, and bing, bang, boom, you're done. Your luggage is already on the plane and ready to head back home. So that was really cool too. Now, that was it. That was the whole like way that Disney's Magical Express worked. So it was, let's talk about why it was good. So it was good because number one, it was free. And I will be one of the first people to say that Disney's Magical Express was great because it costed absolutely nothing. And I remember like arguing for Disney's Magical Express quite a while ago because there were a lot of people who were so anti-Disney's Magical Express, and I'm like, but how can you argue with free? Like, I understand there are negatives, and we're going to get into them in a second, but like, it's really hard to argue with free, at least in my opinion, especially if you're a family who's traveling on quite the budget, or if you're a family who just wants to put your money in a better place. So, Magical Express, that was good, free. The second thing that was really great about Disney's Magical Express, now I don't have any kids of my own, but I do have a sister who is significantly younger than me, and I have traveled with groups of family where there are multiple children, like kiddos, toddlers. Disney's Magical Express was fantastic for people traveling with children. For a number of different reasons. I can point to the entertainment on the bus, the fact that it's basically like an attraction in and of itself. But the thing that was really great about Disney Magical Express, if you were traveling with children, is that since you didn't have to handle your luggage, you only had to worry about managing your kids, which can be hard. Let's not pretend that it isn't. Managing children is difficult, and managing children in crowded, hectic places like airports is like borderline impossible, especially if you have multiple kids. I know there are people out there who are like, oh, well, it's not impossible. No, obviously it's not completely impossible, but I'm trying to give you guys some credit, as parents, you're doing something I don't want to do. So I know that it's hard to manage kids, especially if you have kids like my sister, if you're watching, who are runners. They'll just be gone. Whew. I was always the one chasing, by the way. So if you had a kid that you had to manage, wrangle, handle, whatever, but you also had luggage and maybe even a stroller, that's a lot to do as a parent, and you can really reduce the stress level right at the beginning of your vacation by not having to worry about your luggage at all. So yeah, you have to worry about your backpack or the kid themselves, but you didn't have to worry about the luggage, which was a really important key factor. I also think it's worth noting, although I don't have any personal experience with this in particular, a lot of people talk about how much more convenient it is to take Disney Magical Express if you are traveling with someone who is in a wheelchair or an ECV. Now, I can't work this out in my own head. So when I used transportation to get from MCO to Walt Disney World with someone who had mobility issues, we ended up being in a private Mears van, not in a like motor coach where there are steps and everything to get up. I don't know what the deal is when it comes to people who are actually not people who can walk a little bit, but people who do not have the ability to do that. I don't know how that would work out in a motor coach. So please feel free to share your experiences in the comments down below, because I don't have any personal experience with that. But I have heard people saying that that is also the case. You know, if you're traveling with someone who has an ECV or wheelchair, that Disney's Magical Express was also beneficial as well. Like I said, I can't speak to that. The only thing I can potentially say is if you are able to walk up the few steps that it takes you to get onto the mirror or onto the motor coach, I can see how it would be fairly convenient because you can store that ECV or wheelchair underneath the motor coach. So it's not like other options where you might not have room for it. You can definitely store it on Disney's Magical Express or on a motor coach with a bit more ease. So, like I said, share your thoughts. Once you got on that motor coach, though, we arrive at a downside, and that's how long it would take to get from Orlando International Airport to your Walt Disney World Resort hotel. Now, I think Magical Express would say to count on an hour and a half, 2 hours. And this seems like, wow, Disney must be really far from the airport, for those of you who are not familiar. But it's not that. The thing is Disney's Magical Express makes multiple stops. Now, it doesn't stop at every one of the Walt Disney World Resort hotels, but what will happen is they'll send out a bus to kind of an area. So maybe you'd stop at Old Key West and you'd stop at Saratoga Springs. Maybe you'd stop at one other place other than that, depending on the number of people that happen to be on that bus on that particular day. But they would stop at multiple resorts along the way, and that meant not only driving the 30-45 minutes from the airport to whatever resort it happened to be, sometimes a little bit longer depending on where exactly the resort is on property and traffic, but it would also mean waiting for the driver to get all the luggage out for everyone who needed it. Generally, this would be organized pretty well, and it not keep in mind that prior to 2020, it also wouldn't necessarily mean getting out the luggage that were for the people on the bus. So your luggage wouldn't necessarily travel on the bus that you were on because they were trying to expedite the process. Which is why it would sometimes take longer for your luggage to get to you. So sometimes there would be luggage on that bus that would need to come off, and that would be part of what took time, but it wouldn't necessarily always be like the luggage that you checked at the airport. That might arrive later. But it was things like strollers or carry-ons and stuff like that. So, the downside, that's a big downside for a lot of people, is how long it would take to get to the resort that you happen to be at. And the same is true in reverse. I'm actually going to have a sip of water because my throat was drying out. My nose is all sniffly, like I said. This weather, man. So, it really depends on your perspective and how quickly you wanted to get your vacation started. There were a lot of people who, like I said, they really loved Disney's Magical Express. It was perfect because it was free and it was quick enough. But the other people who talked negatively about Disney's Magical Express had a bone to pick with how long it took to get from the airport to your Walt Disney World Resort hotel. And especially in 2019, which is so funny because I was going to Disney in 2019 and we were doing our research, and one of the things that came up time and time again was how much people were like, skip Disney's Magical Express, it's a waste of time, it's, it's a clunky service, it's not great, you have to wait a long time for your luggage. Like, they had all these negative things to say. And then here it is, 2020. People are like, why are you getting rid of it? But we'll get into that in a second. So that was one of the downsides that people had about Disney's Magical Express, and that worked in reverse as well. Disney wanted to make sure that you were going to arrive at the airport well in advance. They wanted to make sure you were not going to miss your flight. So you would find yourself often having to wake up in the wee hours of the morning in order to check out, get on the Magical Express, and arrive at the airport 3 hours in advance, which I believe was their standard. Now, I've always found that as a pretty solid time to get to the airport, especially if you are leaving from a place like Orlando International. It can take a long time to get through security. It can take a long time to like move about. I know that that's not always a rule. Sometimes it's really easy and really speedy, but cutting it close at Orlando International is never a good plan, in my opinion. But that's a discussion for another day. But people did have complaints there too. So maybe you'd have, you know, a 7 o'clock flight and you find yourself having to get up and, you know, get on the Magical Express at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and people were not thrilled with that. So, you know, that's just another example of what people didn't really like about Disney's Magical Express was the time that it took. And if you put those kind of two things together, that's like the peak, like the thing that was great about Disney Magical Express was the magic, the fact that you didn't have to carry your bags and that you could like manage your family, and the downside being it took long. So those are like the two like sides of Disney's Magical Express. I feel like a lot of people talked about how long it took. A lot of people complained about that. It was just one of those things that people, they were like, take a Lyft, take a ride share. That was their suggestion versus taking Disney's Magical Express, especially as we get closer to 2020 or 2019. You know what I mean? Like around that 2019 time frame, people were encouraging you to take Lyfts and stuff much more often. Probably not the case earlier because there were no Lyfts. It was about taking a taxi or whatever. Although that was an option, it wasn't an option for everybody. It certainly wasn't an option for families. You know, taxis can only hold so many people unless you're pre-arranging something ahead of time. And the same is true for Lyft, but we'll get more into that in a second. So, fast forward to 2020. The parks have closed and they have recently reopened. Disney's Magical Express, I don't think it came back right away, but when it did come back, it came back with some changes, and these changes were for a number of reasons. So now if you were going to take Disney's Magical Express, it was still available, but you weren't going to get luggage tags in the mail. You could ask for them when you got to your hotel, but they were kind of just giving them out, which kind of was like blood in the water, by the way, but we'll talk more about, hindsight's 2020, but we'll talk more about that in a second. So they were just giving out luggage tags at the hotel if you requested them, but you could book your Magical Express in order to get to the hotel or to your hotel and back to the airport. But the big change is that you were going to have to go collect your own bags. And the reason for this was widely said to have been health and safety. They wanted to reduce the number of people touching things. They wanted to ensure that guests and cast members were being as safe as possible. Let's not forget, when the parks reopened, there were still a lot of questions about what was going on at Walt Disney World. There were a lot of questions about how things were going to be handled and how things were going to be treated and everything like that. We're not getting into that today. But another issue was not just the health and safety, but it was the staffing, which, as I'm sure most people know, like this would continue to be a problem throughout present day, throughout today. Finding people to work has been a challenge for a number of different reasons, especially work in certain fields. So they decided that that's what they were going to do. Magical Express was still going to be a thing. You were just going to have to go collect your own bags. And It was fine for someone like myself, because I did take the Magical Express during this time period. It was fine in that all you had to do was treat this as though it was any other vacation to any other place. The only difference was you did have a complimentary ride to Walt Disney World that you didn't have to pay for. So you would have to go collect your own bag. You would have to bring it to the desk, the Disney's Magical Express desk. You would walk it through the corral with you out to the bus, and at that point, they would load it onto the bus for you. They would then load it off the bus or unload it from the bus when you got to your Walt Disney World Resort hotel. It would be organized underneath the bus, and from there you would just take your own piece of luggage over to Bell Services, or if you were fortunate enough, the room would just be available for you. It depends on what the situation was. Take the luggage over to Bell Services. They would hold on to it for you for the day, and you'd have to go collect it from them, or you would have to call them up to your Walt Disney World Resort hotel room, where you'd have to remain until they deliver it. So it was extra steps. It was a bit more work, certainly more work for a family, someone traveling with children, someone having to manage children as well as luggage, especially those young children. But you know, it was fine. It was something we were kind of all dealing with. We're all like, well, it is what it is. And then Disney made the decision that they were going to discontinue Disney's Magical Express. Now, they did this in a post somewhere, if I remember correctly. They did like a press release style thing. And the problem, here's where things went crazy, is that while it's fine that they discontinued Disney's Magical Express, I'm sure people would have been upset about that regardless. I think the thing that really irritated people is just how disconnected Disney sounded when they announced this. So I do have some notes here, not a whole lot, but some. So that's what I'm looking at here. So when they announced that they were going to discontinue Disney's Magical Express, basically what Disney said was, which by the way, I wrote about this over on twofoolishmortals.com, so you can go check that out. I don't have it linked down below right now, but I will link it after we wrap this up. They basically said, hey, look, we know that people are changing the way that they do things now, so why not take a ride share instead of Disney's Magical Express? And this, at least in my opinion, was one of the things that Disney, it should have been a sign. Now that I think about it, it should have been a sign that things were going to go weird. But this is, I think, one of the things that started people getting pretty frustrated with the way that Disney was going to be doing things moving forward, because it is very disconnected for Disney to kind of say this. At the time when they made this announcement, Disney said that they were going to be getting rid of Disney's Magical Express, but there was no replacement in place. Now, to be fair, and I did write about this, Mears has always had options for getting to and from Orlando International Airport to your hotel. They never went away. They had their own private options that you could take advantage of if you wanted them. And there are plenty of other services out there that you can take advantage of. I'm not going to mention any by name because I'm not familiar with any of them, and I don't want to give opinions on any of these until I've had the opportunity to utilize them. Although if you have any that you've used in the past, please feel free to link them down below, or just share information about them down below, good, bad, or otherwise. But at the time, most people can have no idea. They had no idea that there were other things, and that's or other options. And that's because if you think about it, most people who are visiting Walt Disney World, they're people who are of a certain age, and And of that age, a bulk of the people, these young families who are visiting Walt Disney World, did you tell the heat kicked on? Oh my goodness. I know, I always sound like I have a cold. Of these families, a lot of them only remember Disney's Magical Express because it has been in place for, what is it now? 2005. That's quite a few years. So it makes sense that they would be like, you're leaving us hanging. You're leaving us hanging here with no option. What options are there even available? Like, this is the only way. And it's not true. It's not the only way. And there are plenty of people on social media who pointed to it being the only way. And I did get frustrated by that because it's like, it's never been the only way. But I hear where some of you are coming from. And to be like, hey, I know that like the new and up and coming thing is this rideshare stuff. So if you want to do that, you should do that. But by the way, we're not bringing back our rideshare vehicles, which were convenient for a number of different reasons. What we're doing is we're giving you the option of just figuring that out on your own. This became frustrating. And people kind of bickered about it. They talked about it for a little while, but they still had the opportunity to use Disney's Magical Express. And this is where my personal opinion and experience comes into play. Because as most of you know, I did visit Walt Disney World in November of last year. And during that time, one thing that I saw that was very unreliable was rideshare services. Now, that's not to say that every rideshare service at every moment is going to be unreliable, but the reason that I wanted to mention this is because I think Disney commenting that rideshare services were going to be the option to get back and forth not only shows that they don't fully understand the recommendations that they're making, but it also shows that they're not really putting effort towards the same things they used to be putting effort towards in the past. So I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, although I know that this whole conversation is kind of a tangent. But there used to be a time when Disney took the time to look into they used to crunch the numbers. They used to do the research, find out things, like ridiculous things, to make sure that the experience the guests were having was a positive one. For those of you who have been familiar with Walt Disney World and the way they do things, I've mentioned this in the past as well, like they did the research to find out how long a person is likely to hold a piece of trash before they throw it on the ground. And then they put trash cans right before that distance, which is why you find trash cans everywhere at Walt Disney World. They have a color that they paint buildings so that it blends in with the sky. They know the psychology of how to set up a theme park so that guests have a flow of traffic that goes a certain way, or the way that they know how to do this stuff. Okay, it's no secret. So the fact that Disney wouldn't have taken a second to go, well, rideshare companies, they hire people, basically independent contractors. I know there's technicalities there, but we're not getting into that today. Which means there's no guarantee of the amount of people that are driving for ride shares, or guarantee of the vehicle that they're driving. So yeah, we'll just recommend our families do that. That'll definitely be fine. There's no way that follows the pattern of Disney's research and effort to, I don't know, do anything. It seems like it's just a little bit ridiculous to me that they would have just said, ride shares. It almost seems to me like there was one person who was like just disconnected. It makes me think of like, remember the childless millennial thing that was talked about before? It almost makes me feel like it was this childless millennial who never experienced trying to go to an airport and manage a child as well as manage a piece of luggage also for a trip that you really had to budget really hard for, that person is the one who was like, yes, it's perfectly legit to get a rideshare. Is this making sense? I feel like I said, it's a little bit of a tangent, but it seems like someone who's never experienced that type of thing making decisions and going, but the people will love this. This isn't the first time we've seen this. We've seen this recently quite a bit, where it's almost as though people who are making decisions for the theme parks aren't actually enjoying the theme parks, like they're not in the theme parks experiencing them so that they can make an educated decision. They're just kind of going, oh, I've watched movies, this should be fine. So anyway, that kind of sent people off. People weren't very happy with that. Totally understandable why. And, you know, even as a person who was just traveling by myself, I found that getting a ride share, although it was fine, I made it work just fine and it was all right, I find that it was not the easiest experience and it was a bit clunky. And I can't help but think of like if I had a kid with me. Because, well, when I was just trying to get out of the airport to get to my hotel, there was like such a backup of ride shares. People were kind of all over the place, you know. It just didn't seem like a positive experience. I don't know how I would have managed a kid on my arm as well. So, you know, you get it done, but it wouldn't have been great. So anyway, I'm going to try and move on from that because goodness knows we could be chatting about this all day. Fortunately, though, shortly after that happened, let me set these notes down because I'm pretty much done with that. Fortunately, we ended up running into the thing that often happens where other people step up to the plate. So soon after Disney announced that they were going to be getting rid of Magical Express, we found that other things were coming into play. So Mears announced that they were going to do Mears Connect. We also got, I think it's like the Sunshine Express. And I'm sure there are plenty of other things that are going to be popping up. I know that there are other companies that have always been around that are kind of like showing back up and being like, hey, we're still here. We never went anywhere. So that's great. I do think that there are options available, but they're not free. And that is a thing, you know, it's definitely a thing. The fact that these are not free, it definitely changes the way people are going to experience the trip to and from. And it's going to change the way people are booking their trips, at least in my opinion. I mean, why wouldn't it? We've seen this all over where people are talking about, you know, is it even worth staying on property anymore? Well, we're going to have a discussion about that. As you guys heard this weekend, we're going to have a discussion about that next weekend. We're going to crunch some numbers. So be sure to hit subscribe and stay tuned for that. I think the link is already up, so I'll put it in the comments. I'll pin that to the top so you can set yourself a reminder for that. But yeah, I think that ultimately what it comes down to is I think that Disney's decision to get rid of the Magical Express, I'm not surprised by it. We're in some crazy times right now, and I'm not surprised by the fact that Disney would do that in order to cut costs. And considering that there are still, despite the lines that we've seen for Disney's Magical Express, there are minimal people staying at Walt Disney World right now. Hotels, although all the hotels I believe are now open, they're still not taking 100% of guests because of, goodness knows, a number of different reasons. So I think it's one of those things that was going to have to go away because it's not good for right now. But I do think that the way that Disney went about doing that, the way that they went about kind of taking that off the table as an option for people wasn't a great one. Of course, I'd love to know what you have to say. Did you ever take the Disney's Magical Express? What were your experiences? Was it great? Was it not great? Did you have to wait forever to get to your hotel? Did you not like getting up early? Did you have kids and find that it was really fun for them and useful for you? Or maybe, like I mentioned, if you have traveled with someone with mobility issues or in a wheelchair, ECV, I would love to know what your experience was there as well. But I think that's where we're going to end it for today. We are going on just under an hour. I know there are a few of you who joined, so thanks for watching. Hi, I see you there. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up if you liked this video or other videos like it. It helps us out. It helps us get to more happy haunts like yourself, and it helps us know that we're doing something that you enjoy, so we can continue doing that. But I think that's pretty much all for today. We do have some fun videos coming this week, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm going to try and stay warm today. I hope you try and do the same. Hopefully you don't have to try and stay warm because it's just not -6 degrees where you are. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was fun going down this like memory lane, I guess, of Disney's Magical Express. Oh, and as a reminder, before I actually wrap this up, I do think we'll go more into this in another video. Like I'll do a whole video on its own, but I think that this should be a reminder to everyone, like the situation with Magical Express, that you should be careful what you wish for. Like I said, I do think Disney was disconnected, and although I do understand that there are reasons that this might have happened, that Disney might have taken away Disney's Magical Express, I do think that there were a lot of people in a lot of influential positions who were saying that they did not like Magical Express, and maybe that's who Disney was listening to. This isn't the first time it's happened, so we'll talk more about that some other time, but. Like I said, thanks for watching, thanks for hanging in there with me, thanks for dealing with my sniffles, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.